Welcome to Camp Confidential, Beyond the Bars. I'm Katrina McLarin, and with my co-host Cheryl Womack, author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, we tell it like it is. In Season 1, we take you inside the walls of a women's federal prison camp. From pre-sentencing to navigating daily life behind bars, we offer practical advice, survival strategies, and insights that no one tells you before you go in. No sugarcoating, no cliches. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and consult a professional. Today's episode, Walking the Probation Tightrope, is based off the book How to Go to Camp Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison by Cheryl Womack, available now on Amazon. This episode, you're going to prepare for life on paper and some of the missteps that might put you back in the slammer. Whilst in a halfway house, you're still in the Bureau of Prison system and completing that time. Now, this is a private company that will continue to make decisions on your life until you're out on parole. Cheryl, at what point did you find out your time in the halfway house was over and you were going to be released to do out your probation at home?
Well, not surprisingly, communication isn't any better in a halfway house than it is in the Bureau of Prisons. They literally, I think I told you last time that you have to get an out date for an afternoon, then you have to get an overnighter, and then you can get a weekend stay. And so on my first weekend stay, I went home. And when I came back in Monday, after I stayed over, when I came back in Sunday night, because a weekend means you come back in Sunday night by 8:00. Then when they came in Monday, they're like, why are you here? I set your release. Well, nobody told anybody I was set to release, and I really didn't have to come back. But I came back because nobody told me. So that's when I found out I was released after I'd had some of my time off. I was not there, but about less than a week. But again, there are new laws out that have been out since then. I think they came out in 2017, 2018 that said if you're over 60 and you have an approved place to go stay home, you should be able to bypass the halfway house. And I mean, I even read on current things right now that they're not bypassing the halfway house and that a number of people in camps are still doing more time and not getting into the halfway house because they're saying they don't have beds in the halfway houses. But when I got into the halfway house for my bed where it's supposed to be full because there's just one dorm for women, it held 25 women and there were 17 of us. That's how many beds were open. They're just not telling you. They're not telling you properly who's going in and who's going out. And again, I think there's no rush to let you out of the Bureau of Prisons. And they know they're getting a lot of flack to try to let people go straight home and bypass the BOP. But if they can just get you in there like over the first of a month, then if I'm in there till November 1st and I got out on October 29th, they get another month. And so
it's all about money. Really what it's boiling down to, it's all financial.
It is all about money. This is all a financial game.
Because I would have thought it would save a lot of money if you're at home on your own dime rather than being still with the Bureau of Prisons.
So when you are at home, you're on an ankle monitor. If you bypass it, you could go home on an ankle monitor. You shouldn't. You should still be able to just go home because we're going to get into it. But it's pretty strict on the things that you can and can't do. But if you went home on an ankle monitor, you, the felon, pay that expense, not the prison. So they're not making any money on you, but you're not costing them either.
So is that could be a condition of your probation as such, that you're on an ankle monitor? So for you, that wasn't a requirement though, right?
No. I mean, they can put you home and they can't put you on an ankle monitor depending upon what your circumstances are. Mine, I should have gone straight from the BOP, straight into my home with an approved place. They'd already approved the home and been to it. Both justice system and the BOP had been too, because both sides have to go look at it. But then, I mean, it literally was getting me in to stay over the first so that they could get another month's pay.
Justice and the BOP have to go and approve your home. What's that process like? Obviously, do they make contact with your husband? How does that happen?
I think they have to go and they have to walk through your home and they have to see who all lives there and what their ages are and what their employment is. And they have to know everything about everybody inside because, again, remember, you can't be out with anybody else on paper. So if you were living with somebody else who, maybe went to jail and they've got 3 years left on paper or a year left of the 3 years, and that's where you're going to live, you can't go live there. You can't live in a place with someone else on paper. So they're going to confirm those kinds of details and things, and they'll drive by it and they'll physically I guess they physically go in and see it. I would think they'd have to physically, but honestly, I can't tell you what they do pre. I can tell you that once I got home, they physically came to the house. And I was like, I was really busy doing something else. And I said, "Oh, can my husband walk you through?" And it's like, "No, you have to." So I went around and toured him around the house.
What was your criteria for being released at home on your probation? What was your requirement?
I think I had a 30-mile radius that I could travel within the greater Kansas City area. Again, going to KU games if I wanted to go, or go up to Lawrence, which is about 45 miles away. I'd have to let them know in advance in writing and get something back in writing, getting permission to do it. I think even one time we drove, I want to say to Arkansas or something, to get my husband's passport done quickly, or I can't remember, but I remember as we were on our way out of town on the highway driving with our dogs, I'd forgotten to get permission. And I got on the phone and tracked down my probation officer and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm on the road. I'm going. I'll get you an email for you to give me permission, but I'm so sorry, but I'm already gone." And he was very nice and very understanding, but those can be problems for you. It's, you're limited on your things to do, but I didn't do that many things where I went out of the parameters anyway at that time. So it doesn't even cross your mind that you need to think to do those things once you get going and you're past the part where you have to tell them where you're shopping and, whether you're going to the doctor. Now you don't have to tell them things, you just forget. So then there are a couple other restrictions I need to remember. So there can be no guns on the premises, no knives, swords, big things like that. And my husband is an avid hunter and has been. And this is November, so this is hunting season. And it's a really important part of the year for him. And he had to make sure he had no guns on the property whatsoever for him to be around here or at our farmhouse where he likes to go hunt. And he liked to have them at our house because he would go hunt with some friends in Kansas at a different location. But I mean, you have to go through and make sure you're abiding by all those kinds of details. I had to get on the phone once a week and call them. First, I had to go in person and meet with them. And you drive down to the city courthouse and you go meet with them. And, they go, "Who have you been around? Any changes in your household? Somebody move in, somebody move out?" They just want to know anything that you're around. Do you have any travel plans going on? They just ask you a bunch of questions and ask you what you've been doing. And again, mine was probably a whole lot less complicated because I'm semi-retired. I don't have a job like a normal person. I, manage properties or do different things. So I don't have a normal job to say, "Are you going to work like you're supposed to?" Because I don't have to do that. And it's also a little weird because my offices are in my home. And so Rachel, my assistant, comes to my home to work out of my home. And so, that's odd for people when you're not used to that. They come in and go, "Well, she works here?" But yes, she does. So, I mean, you have to go through all the processes of your life. And then one other big one was that for at tax time, I had to give them a copy of my tax returns. That's it. Copy of my no, I'm not sure they could read them any more than I could, but that's what I had to give them, a copy of my tax returns.
So tell me, that first sort of week that you're home and you're living with this new criteria of the 30-mile radius, does it feel to you mentally as though you're free?
No. I mean, no, I don't think as long as I had to call and check in with them, for as long as I had to keep in touch with them, I did not feel, and free is very elusive. I mean, are you ever free? I mean, do I feel free from what's happened in my life even now, 6 years later, 6.5, almost 7 years later? No. I just, I don't know that you feel like you ever fully got your freedom back because things change in your life that just don't go back. And you've also been through, you've been through financial and emotional consequences that you and your family and friends have suffered from, and it just doesn't all come back the same.
So did you feel like there was unexpected struggles that you or your family faced when you got home?
I think they watched me a lot, worrying about me a lot. And all I wanted to do was talk about my experiences because that's what I lived and breathed for 15 months. And they did not want to talk about it. And that was very upsetting to me. They just, all I kept hearing is, "You just need to put your head down and put it behind you now." It's like, no, I'm writing a book. We don't understand. This isn't dying, and that was quite alarming to them. I think that I just couldn't set this down and walk on. I don't think anybody who's gone to prison can just set it down and act like it didn't happen to them. It changes you.
So why do you think you couldn't set it down?
Well, for me, I think it's because I felt like, and I just talked to another friend of mine actually who did time while I was there, and she got out a little bit after me, and she feels the same way. We need to justify, why did this happen to us? We're not quite sure why this happened to us. And I think it's very hard to set it down until I can come to terms with what good can I make out of something that happened that was so off-putting and so out of the ordinary for my life. What good can come out of this to make this a positive I don't know if it'll ever be a positive experience, but an accountable experience that I can justify in my head, right? I mean, I can't get my head around it. And this particular friend of mine can't get it around hers either, because she's another person who sort of got caught in a interesting web, of is she guilty? Is she innocent? It was just a real unusual thing. But I knew that I was not guilty. And so I think especially because I was not guilty, and because I could think of a number of people who could have gone to jail and done more time than me, or time at all, then it deep down, it bothers you. It bothers you that you're trying to say, I have to make sense of this in my life. Now, part of it's learning to just let it go, but part of it is you have to make sense out of it. And I feel like I have to have a positive outcome. This book, the podcasts, other criteria that we'll put together to help other people and hopefully make small improvements in the system would be a good outcome for me.
I think it's really difficult if you've suffered a great injustice like I think you did, that it's really hard to reconcile that because you've been punished for something in effect you didn't actually do. So, you're brought up.
And it still does. And it still, continues, again, with banking relationships or whatever. If I have 2 banking relationships now, so that's a good thing. But if I went out to a new bank and I tried to do a new big letter of credit to do, some apartment complex or, townhomes or something, I could, with the new bank, jump through all the same kind of hoops and the same kind of criteria of being a felon. So, that doesn't ever go away.
Do you think your personal relationships changed between with your sons, your husband, or even close friends?
I had really good friends. I just had really good friends. No, I think they worried about me a lot. I think they really worried about me, and they thought I was really strong, and I didn't feel like I was all that strong. Who's crying all the way through prison? So I didn't feel like I was all that strong throughout this process, but they thought I was strong, and obviously they were very afraid for me, and I became less afraid and just more overwhelmed with how do you manage mentally the time that you're going to do and not have it drag you down. And that's where I needed to get with it. So again, in retrospect, I feel more guilty about having it be more about me. It was all about me and how to make me feel better. And now I have to look back and realize how much more it affected all the people around me. But they don't want to talk about it. They just want to put it out of their mind. So I don't know how to fix it for them. Even for my 2 sons who don't want to talk about it, I've done the dedication in the book for them, and I don't even know if they want a copy of the book. Just, you don't know.
Hopefully they'll watch this podcast and have a little, shed a bit more light on it for them. One thing you've spoken about, and you've been quite frank about this as well, is that you're a little bit more of a hermit now. So do you think that was maybe one of the side effects of coming out of prison, that you are a bit more introverted and a bit more within self?
Prison certainly added to it, but I think just having, even from the indictment, had I not gone to prison, I think even if I'd have gotten out and been found not guilty, through the whole process and how long and excruciating it was easier not to come back. And, it was a pretty popular public figure for having a great company and good employees and being well known for a good place to work and this and that and the other back in the day. And so, you could go somewhere shopping and go, do I know you? So they always wondered that, that happens still a lot. Does somebody know you? Or, your pictures in the paper all the time, usually for wonderful things, and suddenly not. And, so you look familiar, and it's just like, oh, whatever. I was always, oh, whatever anyway. It's not like you want to sit there and say, oh, I'm famous.
Naturally, that's got to be a bit embarrassing. Naturally, that's a human reaction, I would have thought.
I think so. And I think it's just, it changed how you worked so hard to have this pristine reputation and be above reproach. And you just can't do that anymore.
Look, and it can happen to anyone. And I think your story and the Martha Stewart stories, they highlight that this could happen to anyone. But it's a much bigger fish, and it's more impressive for the government if it's someone that's got a bigger bank balance. It's funny because we're talking about all this scenario and the kids and your family, they want to all move on from it. And I understand that, and I know you understand it as well. But from your point of view, so was there any kind of support that you received, whether it was from the justice system or the Bureau of Prisons or your family, or did you feel that the support there really wasn't? You just had to kind of get on with it?
There was no support. Your family's there for you, but they don't want to talk about it. I think they're watching for you to see if they need to help you or if they need to put you in counseling or I don't know what, so they're watching for that. But, the standing joke you say in prison is, I'm wondering if I'm going to stand up at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock by the side of my bed for counts because I'm so used to doing it and wait for somebody to come through and tell me all clear so I can go to bed. You're just so used to doing certain things in a routine that you giggle about those things. You'll suddenly look and go, gosh, it's 10 o'clock. Should I stand up? Now you're giggling about them, but it hasn't left your mind. I really spent a lot of time worrying about a few of the girls that I left behind that I knew were friends and that I cared about and knew they'd be getting out, but worried about what were they coming into. And just, you bonded with them. You made friends with them, and you made friends with them while they were the real human being they were meant to be. They weren't on drugs. They weren't, intoxicated. They were just their natural selves. And so it was really hard to think about how they'd get out and deal with that struggle. And I worried about them a lot because I really became close with them. And on the other hand, while they're all my friends on Facebook now. Most of them are my friends on Facebook. You can't reach out and talk to them all because you can't believe how many of them come and hit you up for $20 here and $50 there and $100 here. And can you help me buy a used car? And I will tell you, when I first came out, I did help people buy a used car. And of course, they didn't pay me back like they were supposed to. Or I did loan somebody some money and they didn't pay me back like they were supposed to. Not unlike my employees who used to come and say, gosh, I really need some money. And I finally got to where with my employees, if you needed money, I would say, I will not give you a loan. I can choose to give you some money because I don't want it to come between us. You're just not going to pay me back. And that's sort of the same thing with them. And even this last one little gal that I was helping quite a bit, she kept asking for $20 at a time, $20 here, $50 there. And it was adding up to a few $1,000s. And I just finally realized you don't have anything besides drugs that's happening in your life that you can do for $20 to $50. You just can't. And so I just said, I refuse to give you any more money. Sadly, she's back in jail now. And she says it's not because of drugs. And I say, okay, maybe they didn't catch you right now with drugs, but probably had something to do with that. But those things, they're really hard. It's still hard for me 6.5 years later to think about those girls that I just think are adorable and have strong, affectionate feelings for and worry about them.
In some ways, it's terrible to think, but you're in a way an easy mark because you do come into this situation with money. And where do you draw the line if you really want to help these people, but you giving them money is just feeding the habit, or it's never going to be enough to solve the problem. I think everyone's got to accept their own accountability to solve their own problems, but that's got to be a hard call on where you go.
It was really a struggle. And even like I said, just recently, we're talking through in just last December, I finally gave the little gal $100 for Christmas, and I'd cut her off a few months back, and she was real thankful for the $100, but she just probably went and did drugs with it. And you just struggle with what can you do, what can't you do? And I just thought I have to do things differently. I have to do informational books. I have to do content, maybe eventually 3/4 houses, but you have to have things that you can put down in front of them that are finished as opposed to giving somebody cash who's struggling with how to put the pieces together. When I think about how hard it is for me, and I still am able to create a living. I still have a safe place to live. I have a safe family. My heart just goes out to people that are going back into environments where they have nothing. I do have support. I have great friends who just go, no, don't worry. We know you didn't do it. Don't feel bad about it. And it's like, I don't feel bad about it. I'm just trying to share with you some of the crazy parts of it.
Do you think that's part of the motivation too, as to why 6 years plus down the line, you are thinking you've set up a charity, Women of Worth, you're working on this book, the podcast. There's all these things around which about creating awareness, and it's helping people in different ways that perhaps isn't monetized in the effect that, you've got to reach a point where you say, well, actually, how can I really, truly make an impact and help people and help you feel good too? I think about yourself and where you're at.
I think nothing can start without awareness. And like I said, my greatest fear is that women are invisible in the prison system. We don't exist to the general eye, or they think we're a very small segment of it, when in fact we're a very large segment of it. We're still not the largest population, but we're the fastest growing population. And so if I can do anything to create some awareness on that, and again, we're going to get back to when a man goes to prison, it's a terrible thing and it's very difficult for the family, but you still have a nucleus of a family that remains behind pulling the pieces together. When mom or your daughter or with a baby, or when a woman goes to prison, most of the time you've broken up a nucleus of a family. And so you have society dealing with that fallout, not just that family. And it's just impossible to completely put that nucleus back together again the same. Those are the things I want people to start to understand about this. The people who will never go to prison, the people who will never need to worry about going to prison, they need to understand how much more damaging this is and start conversations about, is there a better way? I don't necessarily come with answers, but if we don't start having conversations about what's really happening and how long-term consequential these things can be, I don't know how we fix anything.
Very good point. Something thinking about this whole process while you're a year on paper and you're in your probation, you're obviously appointed a parole officer. How does that relationship work?
Well, so while you were at the halfway house, the supervisor of the parole officers comes and visits with you and gives you the name and the address and the first date you have to go see the person which is the week you get out. So it was just like a week later. And then I went down and I met the gentleman that I got. And, he was a nice guy, a young, probably in his 30s guy. And he didn't know much to talk to me about because he just didn't have the normal restrictions that you'd have, or, where are you going? Again, where are you going to work? Are you getting a job? Do you need to get your GED? He just didn't have all the normal things he'd normally have to do. So we'd spend time talking about the system, and I'd catch him saying things like, well, they should have told you that in prison before you came here. And I'd go, oh, but they don't tell you that. And so we'd start identifying. I finally just went to him and said, what would be helpful to you if I could do anything for you to make your life easier when these girls come out of the halfway house and out of prison? What are the kinds of things that you needed from them that they may not be prepared to give you, so that maybe I can pass that along? And that's where he came in and he said, look, if you got any certificates for anything that you finished, and especially if you passed your GED, if you'll just bring that certificate, he says, I can write to the BOP all I want. I can write forever. And they don't care if they respond timely. And so my problem is now I have to make you start over and go back to school to get a GED again until you can give me the certificate to show me you passed. So it can be expensive. It could cost you jobs. It can cost you babysitting. Who knows what consequences it could have because you don't have that certificate. But those are the kinds of things I got to learn by just sitting down and saying, how can I help you? What would make your job easier? And let's just talk about what it is you do, because I wasn't his normal client.
I think you've done a really great job of throughout this process and throughout the book as well of explaining to people it's really important to take some control in the areas that you can of your life. And part of that is to have some control over your own paperwork. And so when you come out of prison, you had your envelopes full of everything that you needed to have. All your paperwork was with you so that you could walk into these meetings and be really organized. So that's probably a really good point to bring out to people that are in there now and looking at coming out, because no one's going to tell you that at this point in time, correct?
They don't tell you that. I'm sure along the way somebody says, don't lose your paperwork, but it's usually probably another girl inside telling you don't lose your paperwork, and you don't understand how consequential it can be.
So you can't leave the country for 12 months, I'm assuming. You've got that 30-mile radius. So I'm assuming that means you didn't go to your farmhouse, where I know you do like to spend a lot of time with your husband. So did life in that way sort of stop? That still stopped for you?
I think at the time we weren't going up quite as much. My husband hadn't quite gotten into, well, actually, I think to look out for me, he started trying to grow them in our backyard here, which didn't work out quite the same. I think.
Are you talking about tomatoes or?
He does heirloom tomatoes and other heirloom vegetables. And so he was turning the place back into a garden. And it's like, oh my God, please stop. But, that's what he does for his enjoyment and pleasure, and does a really good job with it, but certainly a much better job when it's at the farm. And the farm is, an hour and a half away, door to door. So it's definitely out of distance. And I could get permission to go sometimes. Like, it's not like it was off to me. You just had to get permission in advance to go. And so we just didn't go that often because it was just a hassle. I might have even been able to get my passport to go out of town for a legitimate reason, but you're jumping through a lot of hoops. And so it became really easier for me. I think it took me a while to get up and go around and care if I went anywhere. It just takes a while for you to care. You haven't done any of those things for a long time. And for the limited amount of time I was in there, things change, and you're getting used to just a different life of when it's quiet, when it's noisy. You've had all these routines that you put in place and got pretty comfortable with because you don't get in trouble. Now, you're not going to get in trouble necessarily, but you have to reestablish routines.
Did you find that the world had moved on in that time that you were away and in prison?
Oh, it absolutely kept moving. The world doesn't stop for anybody, and it didn't stop for me. And again, I was fortunate. I had good friends who, I have a friend who works with NASCAR in Florida, and they were doing big drawings and building shop developments and things, and he knows how I love business, and he literally send me notes from meetings and pictures out of the paper where they were doing this development stuff and just package them all up and send them. I said, your letters were my favorite because they just talked to me like I was a normal person, like you were sending me normal information, about things that I would love to talk about, instead of, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, or I've sent you 50 rosaries, paid for you to have 50 rosaries. Those are beautiful, beautiful things, but you just want to be a normal person.
So in some ways, society doesn't allow you to actually be a normal person, really, even when you're out and you're on probation, because you've got this level of accountability you need to maintain, and I think for a lot of convicted people, depending on what their crime is, that's important. That level of accountability is still important. And it's all a part of paying that debt back to society as such. In your particular case, I'm not too sure what debt you were paying back to society, to be fair, other than costing more than unnecessarily for taxpayer dollars. You're now at home. Do you think at this point, you had depression? you think you suffered from anything like that? Because I would have thought it's a huge transition again.
I think the depression probably, if it was going to hit hard, it probably would have hit more when I first went in. And that's when I really had to mentally pay attention and say, you're going to live this day to day and not get bogged down in thinking about how long it is or the future or anything. And I mean, I read that somewhere. People give you good books to read, like, reading books about, I cannot remember the name of the book, but a little girl who worked for me sent me a book, and it was about how Jewish prisoners survived in prison camps. And the ones who really survived and did the best were ones who talk about a meal as if they were eating this exquisite meal, or they just, they didn't talk about their horrible conditions. They talked about the life they were going to have as soon as they got out, or they talk about the next life they could have. I mean, you just didn't focus on the negative parts of your life. Even though you're in the middle of hell, you're focusing on the positive things, and you're not being a Pollyanna about it. You're just not going down a road of, it'd be easy to fall off. And you watch a lot of girls when they first come in who it really takes them a while to get with it and snap out of it and just, even look like they can walk around and go eat dinner and talk to anybody else.
Did you have to go about setting up your benefits, your healthcare, Social Security and that sort of thing when you're on probation? Or is it at the end of probation when you're finally released?
Well, that's a horrible part of prison, especially for an older person. This is a really horrible part. So when I went in, I knew, being on Social Security and paying for Medicare, that if you didn't buy it right when you can buy it, you get dinged 10, maybe it's 1%. 1% a year for every year you don't have the coverage. So if you didn't take it for 10 years, you'd lose 10% of the benefits. I have a friend who just figured that out and lost 10% of their benefits because they didn't go. I mean, you can have personal insurance, but then if you find out the Medicare would have been better for you and now you want to get on it, you've lost 10% of your benefits. So that was the first thing. And then I thought, okay, if I had to get on it right away, I better keep paying for it while I'm in jail. What I didn't realize or think about is that the benefits I got would stop immediately. So you can't get Social Security while you're in jail. So for women who think they might be living on that and helping pay their bills while they're in prison, that's not going to happen. They need to know that stops. And if they didn't figure out right away that you were in, then they're going to go retroactively and take them when your coverage starts again. They're not going to pay you for the amount of time to get their money back. If it was 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, they're not going to pay for 2 or 3 months until you break even. And then the worst part is the whole time you're there, you're under the Bureau of Prisons healthcare system. Whatever they provide, that's what you get. And what they don't tell you, so you get out and you have to go physically visit Social Security. And that's where they go over your dates and tell you whether you owe them or when your coverage will start. But the worst part was that that's when they shared that my medical would start the first of the following month. So if I was like 10 days into the month and I had to wait to get to the end of the month for the first of the month, plus 30 days. So I had like 50 days that I had to have no insurance coverage. And I'm in my late 60s. I was horrified. I mean, I've kept in pretty good health, but what if, I got hit by a car, or just, was in a bad accident or something. And I looked at her and I said, I paid for this insurance benefit. She goes, well, that's good because you won't be penalized and lose any benefits. I'm like, whoop-de-doo, that makes me feel better. I mean, it's a really terrible thing that it's a gap that exists that they need to fix, because for people who are coming out, that's everything to them to have their benefits remain intact.
Well, as you say, especially if people are relying on that as a source of income.
Well, think about
a
a lot of
family
people
unit
in prison are not healthy, especially if you've been in there for a while and you've had their crappy food forever that's not so nutritionally balanced. You're not healthy.
You mentioned before about having to reinstate a landline back into your home so that they could reach you. You had to, and still, I suppose, even though you're sort of free in inverted commas as such, you're still having to report in on that phone call with your prison pack and pin, right? Each week?
Right. I have to call them and they give you a code that you have to put your pack and pin number in, and then you have to go through and answer questions for them. At first, they started out talking to a person and answering the questions, and they got it where they automated it. But the other thing you have to know is you have to install a landline. And my kids had talked me into giving them up. So I had to get one reinstalled. And the other reason is because if they want to call you to see if you're home, you have to be there answering that phone, especially while you're on paper. Well, the whole time you're on paper, but when you're first coming for visits and things that you're coming from the halfway house, they're going to pick up the phone and call you while you're supposed to be at your house, and you better answer.
So if we talk a little bit about coming to the end of being on probation, what's the process where you finally find out, okay, you're going to be released and theoretically free from all of this?
Well, it's a very theoretical free, as we've discussed, but you're coming to the end because they're starting to give you paperwork and schedule their last meeting to come go through your house yet one more time, because all the times they might have wanted to drop by, maybe you've got a murderer hiding in the corner. I don't know. So, but they have to come in and go through your house one last time and make sure everything is copacetic. And they just go through and make sure that they go through your conditions and make sure you've met all your conditions, which mine was one. So that's all I had to do. And, they just, okay, bye, see ya. It's a very anticlimactic, it's just such an after the fact kind of feeling that you don't have a feeling for it at all, because it's just over. It's just suddenly over after you've done these rituals all this time that, you do almost think about, I better sit down here and make a phone call for a few weeks after. It's like, oh, it's Tuesday, I've got to make a phone call, because you made them on Tuesdays by 10 o'clock in the morning. You can just get on it, go and get it done, but you got to do it. Again, I imagine for people who are working, or people who, got small kids or stuff. I was very fortunate. I worked out of my home. I could sort of set my times and schedules. And for a lot of people, they just wouldn't have had it as convenient as I had it.
And it's important to note as well that the judge actually at sentencing sets the amount of time that you're going to do on probation. So you can't get good time off or anything like that for probation. That's mandated. You have to do this certain amount of time, and in your case it was this year. So it probably sounds silly, but there's no celebratory dinner or something that this has finally come to an end?
Well, now
or
remember,
does it never come to an end?
Remember, they don't want me to talk about it. It's uncomfortable for your friends and everybody else to talk about it, and your family. So you can't imagine you're going to have a celebratory dinner when they don't even want to talk to you about it. It's just suddenly over.
Seems a bit anticlimactic. It does really.
It's really anticlimactic for something that was such a dramatic thing that happened in your life. It's really anticlimactic. Most things that happen to you that have such strong, what do I want to say, that have strong impacts on your life are celebratory in some way. This is not a celebratory thing. And even when it's over, nobody's celebrating it's over. There's just like, heads down, let's pretend it didn't happen. And that's really hard. Even if you were guilty, wouldn't you want to just celebrate it with maybe other people do celebrate it. We didn't. And I know when I spoke to my friend yesterday, who's been out for about 4 years, she was not allowed to talk about it at home, no conversations, and life just went on, just had to be over.
The unfortunate thing is, though, for you, the person that's gone through it, it hasn't just gone on. And that's the part that's probably really hard for everyone around you to understand, that it really hasn't. And you're still there. And you may always be there. This was 9 years of your life from start to finish. Like this, we're not talking about just the term that you went to prison for. This was a big lead up to it, a big process. And I can only imagine all the trauma of going through that, from right at the beginning of finding out that someone you trusted stole from you. That's just such a betrayal.
I'm starting with embezzlement and going, what money do I have left? What's happening here? And we don't know how to do our books because she had us on this complicated system to, I'm being investigated. It was such a roller coaster ride.
And then you're going to jail. Then you're going to jail. Yeah.
Right, which you just think can't possibly happen. And you think, no matter what, I'm going to fight this because I'm innocent. And then you're like, okay, well, your family will have nothing to live on. You'll have nothing to live on. I literally had somebody get on and say, you're not fighting for all the innocent people in America. You need to just give it up. When the feds come to get you, they're going to get you. And they are, because they have all of our U.S. tax dollars to throw at you and fight it as long as they want.
And the sheer injustice of everything, I would have thought that, that would be in some ways one of the hardest things to get over. At the end of the day, you did more time than the embezzler Brandy did, which is crazy.
Well, but she was their star witness for me. So, so they put their big press release out about, we got one. So she was their big
and the
star.
other person that was involved in, and I'm not alluding to anything to do with the theft, but certainly set up your tax systems, was Al Davidson. He never he never was prosecuted. And
he did them. I couldn't even read tax returns. But like we said before, for the year of my biggest sell and the most money, he signed my tax returns. They didn't even show them to me to sign. And I was so busy living large, that I didn't even realize, that probably a number of years later I went, I don't remember seeing what I had to pay for taxes that year. I just didn't remember it. But I thought, oh, well, okay, they took care of it. They took care of it.
Thank you for listening to How to Go to Camp with Katrina McLarin and Cheryl Womack. For more support, check out the Women of Worth website, www.womenofworthwow.org, where you'll find helpful resources, including Cheryl's books, Mummy Loves You Everywhere and How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison. Whether you're preparing for the journey or supporting someone through it, remember there's guidance, hope, and a community ready to help you navigate this path.